perhaps part of the problem is one of discovery. Tech can do so many things, and the user would like to be able to say, this is the thing I want to do. Now show me how to do it. Rather than, I don't want a long menu of things. I just want to say, this is what I want. And nowadays, people expect Google to give the right answer to that. Or even if they don't expect Google to give the right answer with it, they'll go with the answer that Google does provide. So another item on my list, and it's a horrible one because it's used for all sorts of disreputable things, but search engine optimization. There are people who use unwholesome and unsavory methods to boost the search results of your website. And that's called search engine optimization, but there's a wholesome side of it, which is simply making discoverability work and letting the system, so to speak, work as it should do. I'll stop.
I've written pretty printers for a fair number of languages, including tech. And so at our website, www.matthew.edu/pub, you'll find a bunch of directories, and one of them should have TechPretty in it. It hasn't been widely distributed or used, but I've applied it on a number of student theses when they came in with problems they couldn't solve because of excessive line lengths and extremely poor formatting. And it generally does a pretty good job of cleaning things up. Now, of course, we have to recognize that tech is unusual as a document typesetting language, and that you can redefine anything, including low-level tech primitives and the meaning of characters. David Carlisle had a wonderful example a number of years ago that looks like total gobbledygook, totally random characters that actually typesets a poem. And he does it by cat code changes and various things like that. And it's really quite magical. So a TechPretty printer couldn't possibly deal with anything like that. And I once asked Don Knuth why tech wasn't more solidly bounded or based on grammars. And because he's the father of LR parsing and one of the really key people in developing the understanding in computer science of the importance of grammars for programming languages. And he jokingly responded that he did not believe in grammars. But of course, one has to recognize that his whole reason for writing tech was to solve his problem of writing beautiful textbooks in computer science. And he certainly, when he started out on this project, he wasn't thinking that his typesetting system would come into worldwide use with millions of users. And that creates a totally different design requirement and a whole different requirement for how you document such a system. So he's certainly to be forgiven, but it just is fundamentally a hard problem.
Thanks, Nelson. I'd like to come back to something Jonathan just said before, and building on Kelly's contribution, which is that maybe the problem is of discovery of things. And I really wonder if that's to me, it feels like it's the wrong end of things, because I would actually like to start with a statement that tech, and especially LaTeX nowadays, is simply too powerful for its own good, and even more so for its users' good. There's so much thing out there. Only Tech Live, which is the main distribution, but still not the only one. The main distribution now is 6 or 7 gigabytes big. That's considerable. It barely fits on a double-layer DVD. To me, it's got completely unmanageable, and it shouldn't be surprising that, considering the sheer size, you've got at least 4 or 5 solutions for any simple problem. And well, first of all, we have to realize that we came to that state through many decades. It didn't just start last year or even 5 years ago. It was already the case when I first learned LaTeX as a mathematics student 25 years ago. So it's simply too big. And what Kelly described for herself, which I really recognize, and not necessarily for myself, because I simply don't use tech a lot. I think it's an almost unsolvable problem. Joseph just mentioned the LaTeX Companion, which Frank Mittelbach is writing the 3rd edition of. And that used to be, I mean, in its 1st and 2nd edition, of course, that used to be the way to look for answers and what you, Jonathan, call a community of practice. I think that's what you were aiming at, that, you know, we would have some common ground on how to do things. Now it's exploded to such a size that, I mean, it's really a difference in nature from what Don Knuth built. You know, because Don Knuth built the program, the documentation, and then a set of books that he used tech to typeset. Now you could do the same thing in 20 different ways. You know, just typesetting a set of computer science books in English. You could have 20 different sets of macro packages, and in a way you actually have that. So that's why beginners and even experienced users often come across solutions that are widely different from the things that they used to have. And then, you know, complete beginners are obviously completely lost. I mean, I really like that Kelly mentioned, you know, that you would need to have a teacher, because a good teacher would know how to help people navigate through the, you know, the mountain of things and documentations, because the documentation is there and it is Googleable. I mean, it's not the case that it's hard to find. It's simply that, you know, you need to know exactly what question to ask. That's my intervention. Yes, Joseph.
Just, I suppose, in the same area, I was thinking, I mean, you're right, there are a lot of, Frank said he's read about 5,000 package documentation to work on TLC3. And he is making a judgment about which ones to include and which not to. And I suppose what you're getting at, that we can't get rid of that legacy of material. There's reasons, stability reasons, why TechLive can't just go, well, we'll just cull things we don't think are such a good idea anymore. But at the same time, one does want a way of just saying which ones are the best practice today to use. So the two things don't, it's tricky. I'm not saying it's not tricky. I mean, yes, if you're obviously, for people who are prepared to buy Frank's book, Frank will have made those judgments, or at least some of them. But it's that 60, apparently, I mean, I've not seen the full draft yet, but he tells us it's 1,600 pages long, which is quite a lot to read if you're just wanting one small area. I mean, CTAN have tried having sort of voting, I don't know, would you call it voting? Sort of this, you can rating, that's the word, on packages. I'm not sure that's particularly helpful either. I guess the question is where one would put such information of, you know, you will find, I know, is it John Cook, the guy on Twitter, the guy who does various things, he had a list of packages he thinks are useful. Various people publish kind of useful package lists. The problem is then you still don't know who to trust. I suppose for a beginner, that's the problem. You can find information, you can find ratings, but which ratings, which comparisons do you take any notice of? I know enough people in the community to ask the right people if it's an area that I don't know myself, but yes, as a new user, that's challenging, and I'm not saying I have a solution. I can see there's a question.
Yeah, I think that's where specialized sample documents really can be useful for students. On my campus, as many university campuses, we have support for typesetting dissertations and theses in LaTeX, and we provide 4 or 5 samples that go from the very simplest one that needs little more than sectioning commands and an author and a title page and so on, to ones that have tables and figures and footnotes and indexes bibliographies and so on. And the idea is that they can flip through the text of these, and mostly the text is not readable English. It just says blah, blah, blah. The point is just to show them, here's what the input looks like to prepare the table you're looking at in the PDF file. And for many of them, that seems to work quite well. And the troubles they get into usually are things like the brace they can't find that's unbalanced, or they do have a specialized typesetting need for their particular field. And so recently I added some documentation on how to typeset in multiple languages. So if you're in linguistics and want to typeset in 4 languages in the same document, you can do that. But it's sort of a cookbook approach. And I've mentioned on these sessions before Arvind Borda's books, Tech by Example, and a similar title for LaTeX. But those books are now 25 years old and possibly quite out of date, but they were helpful when they appeared because you could flip through them, find a sample typeset output and said, that looks like what I want to do, and then look at the input that produced it. But again, because of the complexity of tech, this is, in LaTeX in particular, this is getting much harder to do.
When I see a bit of software that I think I might be interested in, I have a look to see if it's got a GitHub repository, and I have a look to see what the activity is on it, and I have a look at the issues, and that gives me some sense as to what's going on there, particularly the issues. Now,